Kayak Flyer here. Join us on the Kayak Flyer podcast. You can find that wherever you listen to podcasts. We have a lot of great guests. We have guests from every stretch of life. Normal fishermen, guys that I know, all the way up to guys that own major companies. We just talk about fishing and fly fishing. We occasionally talk about what it is that they do. Tonight, I'm going to show you a version of a fly that I tie. I'm getting ready to go for a big red fishing trip, and I like to use shrimp pattern. I found this shrimp pattern online. I'm really excited about it. But before I get started, I want to thank my sponsor, cutthroatfurledleaders.com. These guys, if you have not seen a cutthroat furled leader, these are absolutely amazing. They're not what your buddy watched a YouTube video and then decided to make. These leaders are absolutely amazing. You can change out your leaders thanks to their loop-to-loop connection. You can go from a dry fly to a nymphing fly to a big bug to a streamer. They've even got ocean flies. You can shop by the fish you're shopping for, what you're going to try and fish with. You can shop by the actual leader weight. They're incredible. So please go over to cutthroatfurledleaders.com. Use promo code KAYAK to save 15%. So I'm going to start this fly off with a BS10 Gamakatsu. And for those of you that don't want to listen to all the step-by-step, I'm going to make a version of this that is fast-forwarded so that you can just see the fly. So Hobby Lobby is like Harbor Freight for fly fishermen. I got these 10mm cupped sequins. A lot of guys use 2. I'm going to put 3 on here because I jerk a little bit harder when I'm down in Louisiana when it's bull red season in October. So that's what I'm going to put 3 of these on. Just to give it a little bit stiffer pop. And then we're going to go through some of the other things that I do. This is probably going to have a little bit of fast forward on it anyway. Like I said, if you want the shorter version, you can just go ahead and look at it. There's going to be a second video posted at the same time as this one. I'm using a spider vise here. I like it. The only problem is I bought a base separately, because I bought it to connect to my table and it's just not heavy enough, so you're going to see me jerking it around a little bit. So I'm just taking my loon bobbin here. I've got some thread that I'm almost out of, so I may have to change in the middle of it, but we're not worried about that because we all know how that is. We want to get the most out of all of our thread that we can. And I just want to mention that I have a full set of loon tools. I like them a lot. I just keep using scissors until I absolutely cannot use them anymore, so that's why I'm not using the loon scissors. So a lot of guys, you're going to see these videos where they actually buy eyes. What I have done is I have taken my UV thick and my UV orange, and I have taken 30-pound mono, take a lighter, I hit the end of it with a lighter, get a little bit of a bubble, rotate it in the thick about twice, and then coat it in the orange. If you're really picky, you can actually take a black Sharpie on the clear and put it on there, and then after you put the orange on, you'll still have that black Sharpie. So I just fold these over, and then I take my line, my thread, and I just wrap it around. And I have done these before where I put on my feelers first, but the problem is when I do that, I can't separate these eyes without catching some of that other material. So I have really started doing these eyes first. A lot of the videos that you'll see, the eyes will be second or maybe third. That's fine. That's however you want to do. I just prefer to do the eyes first. That way I can get them locked into place. One of the other things you'll see on some of the other videos is they use rattles. A good friend of mine told me not to bother with the rattles, even though I had already bought them, so I'm not going to include a rattle on this disco shrimp. You can use an old pair of scissors. I've got a little pair of side cutters. I use those. Now, one of the things, because I'm planning on only fishing this particular fly at night off a dock, I'm using some glow-in-the-dark Flashabou. I can't remember where I found this at, but it looks amazing underneath a green light, and that's what we're going to be using. Is we've got some white lights above the dock, and then we have some green lights that we're dropping into the water, and we're really targeting specks and redfish at night off this large dock that we have at our rental cabin. down in Grand Isle, Louisiana. So I'm really going to focus on a decent chunk of this glow in the dark. And so I'm going to tie it on a little over halfway, just because I want the tentacles, I want the little feelers to be out farther, but then I want a heavier glow in the dark section still as an attractant. This is purely going to be a reaction strike fly. I'm not looking to fish this during the day. I'm not trying to make anything look really, really cool. I'm just trying to get it underneath the lights and get as much reaction as possible. Now, the only other material that I'm going to use other than foam is going to be from Tyers Dungeon. And I'm just going to take a couple of strands of this flash because, again, I'm not worried about the color. I just want the flash off those lights. And so I'm going to cut this into a couple of small pieces, and I'm just going to attach it to the end of that fly just to give it a little bit more oomph in the lighting. So you can use whatever kind of flash you want. I find everything from Tyers Dungeon to be above average. I really like their stuff. Actually, the Mad Scientist has been on my podcast, but I bought stuff from him for a long time prior to him being on. And if you want to see that, you can see some of my unboxing videos that I've done from Tyers Dungeon, and even some of the flies that I've tied on this YouTube channel from Tyers Dungeon. And that was highly annoying. I forgot to set my phone to silent, so we'll hope it doesn't happen again. So we're just going to go ahead and wrap some of that flash on there just to get a little bit of flash on top of it. Again, I'm going to reach for the Tyers Dungeon. This is the Sand Olive, and I just want a few fibers, and this is the one time that less is more on this fly. And I'm just going to take and I'm going to make a little bit of hair to go over the top of all of that flash, just to make sure everything stays in place. And I'm just going to cut that in half, pull it out a little bit, get rid of those really long ones because nobody wants to see those. And I'm just going to tie it on, and again, I'm just going to double it over like I have everything else. So this is it's a little time consuming when we get into the body, but it's really an easy fly to tie, especially for fishing off a dock. So one of the things that makes this fly special, and he's going to be an upcoming guest on the Kayak Flyer podcast, I bought a River Road cutter. I bought the 2-inch size for the bodies. You just buy some 2mm craft foam from your local Hobby Lobby. Again, the quote-unquote Harbor Freight of fly fishermen. And this just sits right down on the pad they give you. Only use the pad they give you. And you push it back and forth and it's going to pop. And I always like to pick it up and look and see where all my cuts are, because I just didn't get quite the full piece there. Now what you need to understand about these is these are razor blades epoxied into wood. These are very, very sharp. So I'm going to take my newly cut body, and with a Gamakatsu 1X, or size 1 rather, the body's going to come out like this. Where this curve is, that's where I like to start my taper. And if you're like me and you're not really huge into arts and crafts, you're going to have to do this a couple of times to get the taper just the way you want it. And once you get that taper done and it looks good to you, this is where you're going to add this foam, and it's going to give you buoyancy and allow this to really pop. So right where I cut it, that's where I'm going to wrap it, because I want this tail to come up right behind these sequins. So I'm going to wrap it a little bit farther to the back of the hook, and I'm going to wrap that down. And as you can see, that gives that a nice shrimp-like appearance. You've got your feelers laid out, you've got your glow-in-the-dark, everything looks good. So after that, I've taken some of the sand crab that I just shown you, and I took some bait fish white, and I mixed these two together. And I came up with some threads, some fibers here, And this is what's going to constitute my body. Now, because it's a reactionary fly, I'm also going to add some Fly Tyers Dungeon silly legs. Their legs are absolutely amazing, and they don't rot in the sun like some of the others do. So I'm going to use these two things. So when I tie my legs, I just take one of these legs and I just cut it off, and then I'm going to cut it in half. Now as I go back further, I'm going to cut them in half again. But right now I want a couple of long legs sticking out. And if you've got a rotary vise, it helps a lot, because then you can just peel this back and put it on. If you don't have a rotary vise, there are several other ways to do it. I like to just loop mine and catch the loop. You can do it however you feel comfortable with. Again, this is your fly. You do what you like with it. This is not a set in stone pattern. I saw a video for it. I liked it, but there were things that I wanted to change. And so you just wrap that around on each side, and that's going to give you some little legs out there that'll help trigger that bite from those big sea trout and those redfish. Now, you can use an EP fiber brush. I don't, because EP fiber brushes tend to be a little bit more expensive than what I like to spend. I've got the podcast going on. I'm a father of 3. I like to be a little bit more frugal. So I just make a classic dubbing loop, and then I take a portion of that Fly Tyers Dungeon Congo hair in the white and the sand olive, and then I will just spin that up again using my Loom spinner. You can use whatever spinner you like. The one problem with this, you're going to have to get it tight. If you don't get it tight, it's going to pull all the way out whenever you brush it with your Velcro. So this has got to get almost ignorantly tight. And you're not going to use a lot of loops. So you want to make sure and keep all your legs out of it. If you have to hold it up here and do it, that's fine. But this has to be just silly, stupid tight. And I always like to take, before I wrap it, and take my Velcro and just sort of pull it and see how much some came out. So that's not tight enough. So we're going to really have to wrap this quite a bit. There's nothing more frustrating than doing this and then brushing it out and it falling out. So once you think that's going to be tight enough, you're going to palmer that, and you can use the rotary function on your vise if you want to. I'm assuming not everybody has a rotary vise, so I'm just going to show you how easy it is. And you just wrap that around with it palmered, and that's going to be your first leg section. And so then you just wrap it off a couple of times and cut it. And if you have any questions about this, you can actually email me at kayakflyerpodcast@gmail.com, or simply leave a comment on the YouTube video here, and I will try to answer all of those as best as possible. Again, Kayak Flyer Podcast, if you want to hear really good, honest, genuine conversations. It's nothing forced. We're not paying people to come on. People aren't paying us to come on. I wish they would, because that would make my life a lot easier and make my wife a lot happier. But at this point in time, people are not paying to come on. So give that a listen. We're going to do the exact same thing again. We're going to pull this up. We're going to make a couple of wraps. We're going to make a little dubbing loop. And this time we're going to use a little bit more of the fiber. And then we're going to add our legs after this, because sometimes the legs get caught up in the fiber when you lay them down too early. Because we didn't use much fiber in the first round, we didn't have much of a hang up. In this one, I've noticed you will bury your fiber or your legs. So we're going to put a lot of fiber on this one, and then we're going to use our legs secondary so they stick out. Again, we're looking for a reactionary strike from redfish and sea trout at night when shrimp are popping. And that's the whole point of this fly. I would suggest a minimum of an 8 weight in October down in Grand Isle, because the bull reds will get into the bay, and that's where we're going to be fishing. You can take a 6 weight if you'd like. I don't think you'd have much of a problem. It'd probably be a really great fight. I will probably be using mainly a 10 weight with this fly. So again, to check it, I'm just going to go ahead and pull some of those fibers out, and I'm not getting them on my Velcro. I am getting them to Palmer. And again, you can see why I don't like that base. I'm gonna have to get a bigger one. But you just pull those fibers out, and as long as they're not sticking to the Velcro, you know you've got them tight enough. So this is gonna take several wraps. I'm gonna move my thread forward. There are two different schools of thought. You can wrap it all the way up and make these sequins very rock hard. You can make them where they're a little bit looser so they get a little bit more movement. Again, that's going to be totally up to you, because you're going to make this fly how you want it. And so we're just going to wrap that palmered. What we've got basically a fiber brush now without having to use a table and wire. And it's a little bit easier to manipulate. Plus it's lighter, which allows for that foam to stay on top just a little bit more, because this can go underwater, it can move the water from underneath, but you're really wanting to keep this thing right at the surface. So that's why I suggest not trimming off as much as some people would on the foam. So once I have that down, a couple of wraps to finish it off, and I'm going to take my Velcro again. I'm just going to brush it down. This Velcro actually came from some microphone cables. You can pick up a little piece of Velcro at any of your local hobby stores. So I was going to add one more set of silly legs, and again, these are from Fly Tyers Dungeon. When I first heard about Fly Tyers Dungeon, I was kind of turned off because I saw the prices and I thought there's no way something this good can come from a place this cheap. And boy, was I wrong, and I'm glad I was wrong. And you can go back and you can listen to the podcast where we had the mad scientist on, and he talks about how he does things and why he does certain things, and why the cost is what the cost is. And it's a really, really good podcast. He was a really gracious guy to give up his time for that. And he does not sponsor me at all. The only sponsor I have is, again, cutthroatfurroledleaders.com. Cutthroatfurroledleaders.com, promo code kayak to save 15%. And I will be throwing this with a dry fly, a big dry fly leader, is what I'm probably going to be using for this. I may wind up using a nymphing leader, but it won't be a sinking leader by any stretch of the imagination when I throw this down in Louisiana this October. So your leg size, a lot of people get caught up with your legs have to be a certain amount. Again, it doesn't matter. This is a reactionary strike. Redfish and sea trout act a lot like bass and smallmouth bass, and so a reactionary strike is what you're looking for. So you can add extra legs to one side, shorter legs, any kind of movement. That's all you're really looking for. So we're just going to wrap these in. They probably won't last real long with the toothy critters that we're going to be going after. The last thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to lay this tail down and I'm going to wrap it over. Now, I would normally use super glue to finish my fly. I don't have any currently. I also don't know how to use a whip finish tool. So you can whip finish this however you would like. I never was smart enough to figure out the whip finish tool. So I just whip finish by hand. And you know, these are going to be toothy critters. So if you're going to go fishing, you're going to tie, you know, plan on 2 to 3 fish at the most with this fly. They're really going to chew it up, especially with that foam. So I'm going to make a couple of whip finishes, and then all I'm going to do after that is I'm going to take some Loom hardhead, which I have right here. And then I'm not only going to coat those threads on the back, but I'm also going to coat that top of that foam to make it just a little bit more rigid and get just a little bit more pop out of it. And if you get a little too much in there, just take your bodkin and just roll it out and wipe it off. And so you just want to have a nice smooth fly just right across the back where there's some glue. And so now what you've got is you've got a nice fly. It's going to work very well. It's going to be pretty exceptional in the water as far as popping. You've got your glow in the dark. You can take your UV light and you can charge those up at night before you fish it to get it to really stand out. And you're really looking at a reactionary fly. So this is the Kayak Flyer Disco Shrimp. It's how I like to tie it. You feel free to tie some different ones. And if you tie a different pattern, link it on here. Give me a link so I can see how you do it. You may do it better. But that is my disco popping shrimp for fishing for redfish underneath the dock. You can take your Velcro and brush out whatever you want. So thank you for watching. I hope you subscribe. Definitely go and check out cutthroatfurledleaders.com. Use promo code KAYAK to save 15%. These leaders are going to last you forever. You can change leaders in less than a minute. Promo code KAYAK at cutthroatfurledleaders.com. Listen to the podcast if you like to hear people talk about fishing and various other things about the outdoors. Kayak Flyer Podcast. Thank you.